Hi, welcome back to English Recaps. Today, I'm going to explain action-adventure movie called Zathura. A space adventure. Watch out and subscribe my channel for more movies. Get going with a young man Danny watching his father and sibling Walter toss and catch a ball. Presently it's his turn. His sibling needed to continue everlastingly, yet his father demands it's Danny's chance. There's a little contention between the young men. You know how siblings are. Then father tosses to Danny. Is a terrible catcher, however, so his sibling hops in to get the following ball tossed. Danny considers his sibling a few names and tempests into the house. Father pursues him and finds him concealing in the moronic server a remarkable name for such a contraption. He converses with him about utilizing that sort of language and furthermore lets him know it's anything but something terrible that he can't get at 6. Danny looks at himself to Walter, who is 10, saying Walter is superior to him at all that. Father lets him know he's better at piano, yet Danny says he detests that idiotic thing. He then, at that point, runs off to his room and father follows him. Danny is as yet discussing how Walter beats him at everything and father is currently letting him know that he's extraordinary and he has an unimaginable creative mind. Walter's at the opposite side of the entryway snooping when Danny inquires as to whether his own creative mind is superior to Walter's. Father answers, "You're not quite the same as Walter." Right response, buddy. In any case, Walter's attempting to play football, yet father says he needs to work. Evidently his folks are separated and mother is coming to get the young men later in the day. Yet from Walter's response it seems like he likes to be a father than mother. I've forever been a mom's kid myself. Now the young men come in and are contending again. Father is gone to hear, so he shouts at the two of them. He then quiets down and lets them know that there are a few days when they need to grow up at the same time, and he wants today to be one of those days. Now the young men are in the room attempting to sort out what game to play. Really, Danny is attempting to sort out what game to play, and Walter's being so lethargic. So Danny asked him when he turned out to be so mean, yet Walter says he's not mean, he's simply grown up, you know, fourth grader who has a sweetheart adult. Anyway, Walter eventually agrees to play army men with his brother, but it soon turns into a fight and Danny ruins Dad's picture. So he has to run off to go get a replacement, but before he goes upstairs to wake their older sister Lisa. He asks her to watch the boys, but as soon as he leaves she goes straight back to sleep because she has a date. By 8, typical Danny is now playing video games and Walter comes to turn it off because Dad said no video games. Walter is now watching baseball and won't change it to SpongeBob, which Danny wants, so Danny goes to get a baseball in mid and has to play, but again Walter says no, so Danny just starts throwing the ball at him until he throws it too hard and Walter starts chasing him around the house. Danny goes to hiding the dumb waiter, and when Walter finds him he rolls him down to the basement. He's now walking around the basement, and when he hears a creepy noise he runs out, and on his way out he finds an old game under the staircase. The name of the game, Zathura, a space adventure aka Jumanji in space. He brings the game upstairs, and since Walter is uninterested he's now exploring the game alone. He hits a button and a card comes out. He can't read what's written on the card, so he hands it to his brother to help him out. The card says meteor shower, take evasive action. And while Walter is explaining to his brother what is written on the card, something drops from the roof and shoots right through the car to the floor. Then the TV goes blank, the house starts shaking and stuff starts breaking all around the living room. Apparently this is the meteor shower. The boys start running around and finally take cover in the fireplace. Then the TV comes back on when they think it's all cool. One huge meteor drops from the sky, destroys the TV. Oh, and by the way, while all the chaos was happening in the living room, Lisa was upstairs on her bed with her headphones on. The boys now notice all the chaos only happened in the living room, and when they look through the hole in the ceiling they realize they're in space. They open the door and confirm it. Walter spits and his saliva is floating. Their house is basically floating in outer space. Elon Musk, eat your heart out. At this point they have to tell their sister, so they head to her room and wake her up. They rolled the window up to show her they're in space, but she thinks it's just not already, and all she's concerned about is getting ready for her date, which she believes she's already laid for. They manage to convince her to watch what the game does, and this time it's nothing dramatic. He's promoted to the starship captain and moves ahead to spaces. That's it, you knew that would have happened, didn't you? So Lisa closes the door thinking they're just pulling her leg, but the next turn the card says sleepmate enters cryonic sleep chamber for 5 turns. Then boom, Lisa's bathroom turns to ice and she's frozen like Elsa. You get it, I'm sorry. Walter goes to bring fire to melt her, but Danny suggests it might be time to read the instructions. This is for all you who don't read terms and conditions first anyway. The instructions say once they embark on the journey there's no turning back until Zathura is reached, so they get back to playing. It's Walter's turn now. His card says his robot is defective. Next we see the silhouette of a huge robot approaching them, but only a little robot appears saying emergency. Funny, right? But not so funny when the little robot starts growing. It's now almost as tall as the house. It looks at Walter and says alien life form must destroy, and then run straight towards the boys, but they jump out of the way at the last second. And it runs into the wall. It turns towards Walter and says alien life form must destroy again, and Walter tells Danny to go take his turn. He's too scared to do anything though. As the robot chases Walter around the house, it goes out the window, comes back into the house and crashes into a wall. But it doesn't stop this robot. It's so relentless, it still has its sights set on the little boy. How about you pick on a robot your own size, like the new robot that Elon just announced? Anyway, Danny finally takes his turn, and everything in the house starts moving sideways, including their frozen sister. The card says something about entering the gravity field. Their house is now in free fall, but thankfully that throws the robot downstairs just before it could get Walter. By the time everything normalizes, Lisa has now rolled downstairs all the way from her bathroom. Walter risks his life and goes downstairs to get his shoe from the robot, and honestly, I can't blame him. Those are Nikes. The boys now take their sister back up to where she was, and Walter gets back to the game where he's now promoted to Fleet Admiral and moves up 4 spaces. Danny, on the other hand, is no longer interested in playing. He goes to the kitchen to make himself mac and cheese because he's hungry, and there in the kitchen the boys get into another argument, but this one is not as bad as different ones. The young men truly come to a comprehension. Danny says he needs Walter to not be unkind to him, not disregard him, and deal with him like a sibling, and Walter says cool, so Danny consents to play. Now the card says they're visited by Zorgans, and afterward they hear a stunning commotion and see something moving external the house. It stops before the kitchen and starts shooting into the house. It's currently following the young men wherever, even into the chimney that was once there. Post amidst the tumult, Walter proceeds, and the card says reinvent, yet they don't have the foggiest idea what that implies. Walter even attempts to show the vehicle to the Zorgan like it'll understand it and comply, yet it actually takes shots at him. Shock. In any case, Danny goes ahead and the vehicle advises him to protect an abandoned space explorer. They initially go to stow away, however at that point they hear the chime ring. Obviously they don't open, so the space explorer simply breaks in, yet he's cool. He doesn't go after them or anything. As a matter of fact, he gives Walter a little example to not rush to sell at his sibling, since he's all he has. We'll comprehend this better later. At any rate, he's presently helping the kid of their Zorgan issue his enormous plan to conceal the house, the whole house. Brother, I need to perceive how you will do that. He gives the kid a few directions, essentially to switch off electrical machines and put out every one of the discharge. Well, it functions. When the whole house goes dull, the Zorgans quit going after the space explorer, then sets father's rest love seat ablaze and pushes it out into his face. The Zorgans follow the intensity and disappear. Evidently Zorgans are heat searchers, and they fly around searching for anything they can copy up, so that draws in them. After the Zorgan issue is tackled, the space explorer strikes the refrigerator, since he had been eating speed out of a cylinder for a considerable length of time. Walter could do without that. He's eating all their food, so he defies him. He remains on his specialist's armada, chief of naval operations, and requests that he take off from this house. Obviously that doesn't work. It's a card gracious, and by how the space explorer is an armada chief of naval operations. Also note this, I can't help thinking about what everything implies. At any rate, space traveler fellow says since it was Danny who turned him, just Danny can request that he leave, yet Danny doesn't actually believe that he should leave since he has been useful, so he requested that he stay regardless of the gaze intently at he was getting from his sibling. He is sorry to Walter, however, yet he shut him up. They return to the game, and Walter sees something is off base. He says he was in front of harm previously, yet presently Danny is ahead, so he quickly blames his sibling for duping. Then they begin yelling at one another to settle the entire thing. Walter moves Danny's piece in reverse and afterward goes ahead, yet the card that comes out says found swindling program dismissal. Then blast something sucks Walter up into his face, and he almost goes out through the opening in the rooftop, yet he figures out how to hang on until he was unable to endure anymore. Yet the space traveler whom he never needed to remain turned out to be the individual who went into space to save him. Walter's back in the living room now and is blaming his younger brother for everything. Danny keeps apologizing, but Walter seems uninterested in his apology. Anyway, Danny goes his turn, and the card says goes loose map of galaxy. Go back to spaces. His piece goes back 2 spaces, but more importantly 5 turns of God, so Lisa and freezes in the bathroom. and is now looking very suspicious. Unsurprisingly, she's cold as hell, so she goes to turn up the heat. The fire is up again, and you know what that means, don't you? The Zorgons will be back soon anyway. She goes back into the shower and blasts her music. Obviously, she has no idea what happened to her over the last few minutes. The boys get back to the game. Walter rolls a 9 and gets a gold card which says shooting star. Make a wish. As a passes, he's really excited about his card, but instead of focusing on his excitement, he decides to pick on his brother for the umpteenth time. Boy, how about you give the little boy a break? He's blaming him for everything now, even their parents' divorce. That's so mean. And Danny reacts by picking the game up, tossing it, and running off. As he runs off, the shooting star appears. And guess what Walter's wishes? No, it's not what you're thinking. He didn't wish his brother never existed. He's not a monster. Wishes for something a lot sillier. He signed football. Well, better silly than his brother not existing, to be fair. But why in outer space that this lad not just wish for the game to just be over? Why did he not wish for them to be back to their normal lives? These are the questions Danny is now asking him, and his replies that he was under a lot of pressure from the astronaut yelling at him. Well, I thought you were a tough guy, couldn't withstand some yelling. Your girlfriend won't be very proud of you anyway. Astronaut guy is now telling the boys his own story. Apparently 15 years ago he was just like them, playing the same game with his own brother whom he used to fight with a lot, and their fighting only got worse as the game progressed. He's telling them now that while he was playing he got the wish card that Walter just got, and his wish was what you thought Walter was going to wish. He wished that his brother had never been born, so he was stuck there in the game because the game would not allow him to spin again, as it was not his turn, and since his brother didn't exist anymore it could never be his turn again. He ends with a lesson to Walter. There are some games you cannot play alone. The story seems to have worked. The boys agree to work together and finish off the game, but just before they get back to the game they hear a loud bang. Zorgons are back. They don't come for them this time though. They take the game and leave. Their only way back home is gone, so they try to burn some wood in order to generate some heat to get the Zorgons to come back. While they're doing that, Lisa comes downstairs and puts out the fire. She still doesn't know they're in a game and in space anyway. The heat they generated was enough to bring the Zorgons back, and while the boys patiently wait for them to approach, Lisa is freaking out. She runs downstairs trying to find hiding, but she sees the robot and runs back up. On her way she meets the astronaut who tries to comfort her, and it seems like she's found love in his eyes. You're finding love in the midst of all this chaos. I guess Rihanna would be proud because she found love in a hopeless place. Anyway, they head back upstairs as the Zorgons are absolutely wrecking the entire house. They land on in the house, and the astronaut tries to get into their ship to get the game while the kids hide in the laundry room. He keeps in touch with the walkie-talkie from army men. Oh, by the way, I'm correct. Lisa is in love with him. She's talking about his eyes, how safe she feels around him, and all that girl talk. Ma'am, we're in space, can you please focus? Anyway, the astronaut comes back without the game, and then Danny comes up with a brilliant idea. He says the astronaut can use the dumb waiter. Once he grabs the game they'll quickly pull him back up, but here's the thing, astronaut guy and everyone else is too big for the dumb waiter, so Danny has to go. But before he agrees to go he asks, do we really need the game? And I could really relate to him in that moment, because that's the exact same question I would ask if I were in his shoes. Anyway, just before he's lowered down, him and his brother have a really cute moment. Walter tells him he'll never let anything happen to him. Danny apologizes for cheating. They're cool now. While they're lowering Danny in the dumb waiter, a Zorgon appears in the distance, so they stop lowering and don't answer when he asks why via the walkie-talkie, because they were trying to stay as quiet as possible. So Danny, who doesn't know what is going on, shakes the dumb waiter and something disconnects. Now he's in free fall. They try to save him by holding onto the ropes, and the noise brings the Zorgons back. Meanwhile, Danny is now close enough to the basement. He sees the case, so he simply bounces down and picks it. However, it's the crate. The actual game is on the Zorgon transport, and Danny goes to get it despite the fact that the space traveler cautions him not to. This kid is so courageous. He truly isn't in the Zorgons area right now. He gets away from his organ, which was out for him, goes through a few outsider-looking goats with 4 eyes, and saves the game. In the meantime, he has now lost to walkie-talkie, so he couldn't speak with individuals in the house any longer. The final thing that was heard before one of the Zorgon crushed the walkie-talkie was the space explorer advising him to wait and not as yet come up yet. Danny didn't hear that, so when he got the game he went directly to the moronic server and began shaking it for them to pull him up. His organ sees the development and promptly cuts the rope, and the imbecilic server lands on the ground. In the meantime, on his back Danny stepped on some vile stuff, so he essentially left the path which his organ is presently following, that is Zorgon thunders as though to call others organs. And they are currently on Danny's tail. Not long before they get to him, Walter comes and pulls him in, yet they're gotten with more Zorgons together the steps, yet as they're actually remaining there, the robot returns out and snatches Walter by the neck, and presently his procure program card works. The robot reconstructs and goes straight for the Zorgons. Gracious, these Zorgons can take off. Fascinating to see. At any rate, the robot is a man on a mission. He continues to say outsider living thing should obliterate. So we try to obliterate the Zorgons, yet there's one remaining in the house, one that almost applauds the young men. Yet the elder sibling asks the hero to return to the game. Now Danny turns and gets a 9. The card says fail space foundation return 1 space. Walter rapidly turns just after he gets a 3, and his card says hit time travel return 3 spaces rehash last turn. So he gets another wishing card. His opportunity is here. The meteorite comes around, he stands, faces the star, shuts his eyes, and wishes the space traveler had his brother back. And you won't believe what appeared. Danny, you get what that means, right? Waltery actually wished his brother away 15 years ago and grew up to be the astronaut. But my question now is, if his brother was Danny all along, how come he hasn't said anything this entire time? Like they're really wearing the exact same clothes. You could have just said something, bro. Anyway, the two Dannys touch and pretty much merge into each other, and Big Walter goes to Little Walter and says thank you. He also tells him to make sure Danny gets home safe. After that, he puts his hand on Little Walter, changes into Little Walter, and then they merge. It was at that moment that Lisa realized that she had been crushing on her own younger brother all along. Gross, but you can't exactly blame her, can you? Anyway, there are now Zorgon ships all around their house, shooting everywhere. So they get back to the game and try to get a tent. Apparently they need a 10 to win, but Danny only gets a 1. I suck, he says, but the card thinks otherwise. Kid, the card says, would you like to swing on a star? Move ahead 9 spaces. You know what that means, right? In case you always missed math class, 1 plus 9 is 10. So they actually get the 10 they need to beat the game, but the next few seconds don't feel like winning, they feel like the apocalypse. As a matter of fact, everything is burning. A ball in the game starts spinning really quickly, then it stops. A card comes out which says game over, thank you for playing, I'm okay. While they're wondering why they aren't home yet, something rips out the wall and sucks Lisa into a black hole. The boys are holding on for dear life while literally everything is being sucked into the black hole. Their pieces on the board are still moving, and then Walter's also sucked into the hole. Danny closes his eyes and lets out the loudest scream his tiny vocal cords can muster, and boom, he opens his eyes and finds himself at home in front of the game with Walter still watching sports. And would you believe it, this little boy's hand was on the button. Walter tells him not to push it. I can't believe he even needed someone to tell him not to push the button. After all that, they go and check everything, and it's all back to normal. Now the boys are best of friends. Their dad gets back and they tell them all about it, but he's hardly even listening. Relatable, he just seems happy that his boys are finally getting along. Now the boys are outside playing catch when their mom comes to pick them up. Their sister joins them, and they all promise to never speak on this again. Just before the screen goes black, a bicycle falls from the sky. Don't ask me what that means. I don't know. Moral of the story, Jumanji.